Most artists spend years struggling to get their portraits just right, but after decades of drawing, I found one simple change that made all the difference. So I'm going to show you the simple shift that's helped transform my students' work without endless corrections. To start, let me show you how you can cut your drawing time in half with better accuracy. When I first made the transition from the grid method to freehand, I was frustrated, constantly adjusting things, barely making any progress, and spending about 3-4 hours just to finish a tiny section of a portrait. And it's funny because it wasn't until I watched a few episodes of Portrait Artist of the Year and gave myself the same time limit of 4 hours to complete a drawing, suddenly I was creating work like this 4 times as big in the same amount of time. So what changed? Instead of starting with the eyes, aiming to get them perfect before moving on, I began mapping out the entire structure by simplifying the tonal shapes, making the process 10 times easier, and only doing the eyes nearer to the end. Here's why this works. If you start with the eyes, you literally have nothing to judge the rest of the face against. You're basically guessing. It's like moving into a new apartment and the very first thing you do is just nail a painting onto the wall without bringing in your furniture first to see how everything else fits. But when you lay out the whole structure first, you have clear reference points for placement and your proportions. So why do we naturally want to start with the eyes first? Well, eyes carry emotion and the life of the person, so logically it makes sense that if we get the eyes right, the portrait will work. But here's the truth, likeness comes from the entire structure, not just from one small section. It's like trying to recognize somebody through a telescope aimed at their eyes. You can't really see who it is until you step back and you take in the whole picture. If I showed you this close-up of an eye, you would have absolutely no idea who it is. But it's not until we have more context and we can see more of the portrait that we can identify the person. Now, I did this drawing many years ago using the grid method, which I now kind of feel like was cheating. And before you grab your pitchforks and start coming after me, I'm not saying if you use a grid you are cheating, because it's a personal thing and it all depends on what your goals are. But I'm showing you this to further my point. Back then, I thought by focusing on one feature at a time, getting it as perfectly detailed as possible would automatically give me the likeness. But as you can see, you need much more of the face to get that. So how do we draw more of the face with less detail, but with better proportions? Well, let me show you. Let's take one of my references. Nice photo, nice lighting, nice profile, but it's packed with details enough to get overwhelmed. But watch as I strip away all that noise and just keep the essentials. Now I have a much easier portrait to draw while still maintaining all the likeness. Here's the secret. Proportions come from how you place the core lights and the core shadows. That's what creates likeness. Without them, no amount of detail will ever save your drawing. You could spend 100 hours perfecting the eyes, but if you don't have the core lights and the core shadows, then you don't have the integrity of the person. To prove this point, let me show you this. Which beginning stage has better likeness? Now, this doesn't mean you should never work feature to feature. I do a lot of my portraits in that way, but here's the catch. It only works if you really understand the fundamentals, because you can visualize where those connection points are rather than having them on your paper. Otherwise, it'll be like playing a game of pin the tail on the donkey. You're going in completely blind. So next time, block in your core lights and your core shadow shapes first. Don't worry about the details until the main structure is down. You'll be amazed how much easier and faster your portrait will come to life. Now, this next part is where a lot of artists still trip up for the exact same reason as before. Once the foundation is down, they try to shoehorn as much detail into the eyes as possible, and as a result, they overwork them so they lose that likeness. But what if the real secret to capturing that personality is something much simpler? Well, let me show you. See how I haven't even drawn the curve of the eye. There's no detail, no eyelashes, no definition, no anything really, just straight lines of basic shapes. However, when we zoom out and we look at it normally, it says everything and more of her personality and likeness. But let's push this idea even further. What if we remove the eye entirely? How do you reckon a portrait would look? Believe it or not, but you are looking at an eye. And this isn't just any eye, it's of a character from a very well-known film. And I'll bet you £5 you have no idea who it is. It's Edward Norton from the Fight Club. So why does this work? How can I literally remove all the detail from an area that holds the life and soul of the person but still capture his likeness? Well, it's down to one reason. When we zoom out, you have more context of the person. You can see the surrounding areas of the eye, so your brain fills in the gaps. It's like hearing your favorite song in the distance. You can't quite hear all the notes and lyrics, but just by slightly hearing the melody, your brain fills in the gaps and you can start singing along without actually properly hearing it. That's the power of focusing on the essentials. Now, does removing the eye from every portrait work? Probably not. But you can still imply and suggest areas that allow your brain to fill in the blanks. So next time you draw, try leaving out a detail and replacing it by implying a basic tonal shape and see if your portrait still holds up. You might be amazed at how much your brain and the viewer's brain can fill it in. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you want to learn the exact framework my students use to transform their work, watch this video here.